So, hey guys, if you're not catching the stream, this will be just a sort of recap. This is just studying for a little bit. So hope you all enjoy. Video gaming is an extremely popular leisure time activity, with more than 2 billion users worldwide, Newzoo 2017. However, the media, as well as professionals, have underscored the potential dangers of excessive video gaming. With the present research, we aim to shed light on the relation between video gaming and gamers' psychological function. Questionnaires on personality and psychological health, as well as video gaming habits, were administered to 2,734 individuals, 2,377 male, 357 female. Median age, 23.06. Results revealed a medium-sized negative correlation between problematic video gaming and psychological functioning with regard to psychological symptoms, effectively, coping and self-esteem, affectivity, coping, and self-esteem. Moreover, gamers' reasons for playing and the preferred game genres were differentially related to psychological functioning, with the most notable findings for distraction-motivated players as well as action game players. Future studies are needed to examine whether these psychological health risks reflect the causes or consequences of video gaming. And hey babe, welcome back! I'm streaming right now. You want to join?
I'm tired.
Tired?
Because my circadian rhythms are not fucked up.
That.
Also, you know how my voice sounds like this?
Mm-hmm.
Allergies.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Found them bad.
Look, they're hitting us with.
Well, that is anti-pollen. I'm just going to be studying for a little bit. I decided since I was going to do it, I might as well just stream it, so I'm not like doing it alone and shit. It's a lot more.
Are you streaming on Twitch? I'll watch.
I am. You're my favorite person. Thank you. It's a lot more informal, and I like that. I can sort of just like stop, pause, rewind, go back.
While you're studying, you can talk about what you learned. That's really cool. Okay, well, I will hop on Twitch and I'll follow you, okay?
Thanks, baby.
Love you.
Sorry, I was checking my blood pressure. It's a little high right now, as I figured. Unfortunately. Okay, so back to it. Video gaming is a very popular leisure activity, blah blah. We read all that, right? Oh, no, we did not. Introduction. Video gaming is a very popular leisure activity among adults. Pew Research Center, 2018. The amount of time spent playing video games has increased steadily, from 5.1 hours a week in 2011 to 6.5 hours a week in 2017. The Nielsen Company, 2017. Video gaming is known to have some benefits, such as improving focus, multitasking, and working memory. But it may also come with costs when it is used heavily. By spending a predominant part of the day gaming, excessive video gamers are at risk of showing lower educational and career attainment, problems with peers, and lower social skills. Mahara and Higuchi, 2017. On the one hand, video game use is widespread, and it may come with certain precursors as well as consequences. On the other hand, little is known about the relations between various video gaming habits and psychological functioning. The study aims to shed light on these important relations using a large sample. A video game is defined as a game which we play thanks to an audiovisual apparatus and which can be based on a story. Esposito, 2005. In the last few years, the amount of scientific research devoted to video game playing has increased. Ferguson, 2015. Calvert et al., 2017. Hamari and Kiernan, 2017. Most scientific studies in this area of research have focused on the extent of video game play and its diverse correlates. While some researchers have emphasized the benefits of game playing and even suggested therapeutic use of video games. I'm just going to leave these up for you to look at yourself so I don't have to keep reading them out. And that way you can just click on them yourself if you're interested. Others have been intrigued by its potential dangers. Parents and professionals may be worried about their excessively playing children being addicted. However, problematic and potentially addictive video game use goes beyond the extent of playing in hours per week. It also includes such issues as craving, loss of control, and negative consequences of excessive gaming. While it is still a matter of debate whether problematic video game play should be considered a behavioral addiction, its status as a mental disorder has been clarified since the release of the DSM-5 in 2013. In the DSM-5, the American Psychiatric Association defined internet gaming disorder with diagnostic criteria closely related to gambling disorder. Generally, this decision has been supported by many researchers, but has also caused controversies. Researchers have criticized the selection of diagnostic criteria and the vague definition of the internet gaming disorder construct, which excludes offline games from being related to addictive use. Several studies, literature reviews, and meta-analysis have focused on the correlates of problematic video gaming, usually assessed as a continuum, with addiction marking the upper end of the scale. The degree of addictive video game use has been found to be related to personality traits such as low self-esteem and low self-efficacy, anxiety, and aggression, and even the clinical symptoms of depression and anxiety disorders. Potential consequences of video game use have been identified as well, such as a lack of real-life friends, stress and maladaptive coping, lower psychosocial well-being and loneliness, psychosomatic problems, and decreased academic achievement. So far, all very interesting, I must say. Several studies, literature reviews, and meta-analysis have focused on the correlates of problematic video gaming, usually assessed as a continuum, with addiction marking the upper end of the scale. The degree of addictive video game use has been found to be related to personality traits such as low self-esteem and low self-efficacy. We already read that, so let's go on. Effect sizes have varied widely across studies. There seem to be sex and age differences with regard to video gaming behavior. Potentially problematic video game was found to be more likely among males than females and among younger gamers. In addition to looking at problematic video game use and its relation to psychological functioning, it is relevant to also focus on why individuals play video games. Players use video games for very different reasons, such as to distract themselves from daily hassles or because they enjoy the social relationships they have developed in the virtual world. Potentially problematic video gaming has been found to be related to various reasons for playing, such as coping and escape, socialization, and personal satisfaction. Coping, social interaction, and competition were among the main reasons for gaming among males, but not among females. Mixed results emerged concerning age differences, but especially younger gamers seem to be motivated for video gaming by social interactions. However, so far, it remains unclear to what extent people's various reasons for playing video games are differentially related to their psychological function. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. There were some points that they don't actually mention. So we have some really good examples of how we can learn why people game. So first of all, there's this big idea behind humans playing for thousands of years. It's that the fact that the medium has changed. So we've always played, whether it be outside or indoors playing a video game. There's always been some type of play. And so we look at the motivations of play, and some of them are examples like competency. We want to feel good at something. It's why we tend to be driven towards certain things. We typically don't do things that we're extremely bad at because we want to feel like we're doing good. And with that competency, it helps us build up self-esteem. Of course, that leads into stuff like progression. If you are competent at something, eventually you want to become better and better. And there's a sliding scale of the level of difficulty and the level of skill. And for video games, usually what you see with players is as the level of difficulty goes up, or as the level of skill goes up, the level of difficulty goes up. And that is what helps with good game design. So things like your accomplishments kind of tie hand in hand. And accomplishments are just that. It's why we have a progression system with trophies, with leveling up, with new gear, with unlockables. We want to feel like we're doing something, because just like in real life, where we're trying to shoot for that big promotion, progression feels really nice, and we want to feel like we're getting somewhere, and we can directly see that on a video game every time we log in and we see those trophies. And of course, back to the whole social thing, we like to compete. A lot of us are naturally born competitors. They refer to these players as killers, and it's not what you think. So killer players are those who like to dominate the other opponents. They're fiercely combative, and they might be somebody like, for example, you'd see in high-level sports like mixed martial arts or wrestling or baseball or track and field. And these are players who typically, for example, want to compete in high competitive settings. They like that. They like the challenge. They like the adversity. They like rising to the occasion. So next thing is autonomy, in the sense of being completely in control. So games provide independence, and they allow players to take risk in a safe space in which it's not going to directly impact them in the real world. It allows them to make choices and stuff without that added pressure. And relatedness is how we relate to the game, right? So for example, we might be really engulfed in the stories. We might be really engulfed with the characters because we see a part of ourselves in those characters, and they reflect, at least in some part, realistic. If it's not a game, like let's say set in a fantasy world, even if it's not like a realistic game, it can be realistic characters, which is why we can kind of feel for anti-heroes, because people like Superman, even though everybody knows Superman, the reason he's not so relatable, at least especially in his early comic days, was because he was almost like a perfect god. And when you get something like that, that's bland and boring. So with games, it allows us to connect with characters. Sometimes you even see, like with TV shows, like take Breaking Bad, for example. I knew a few people on YouTube who were doing these video essays, and they talked about how they almost copied the exact mannerisms or specific, character traits of different characters that they were watching on Breaking Bad, and even talked or acted like them. And you can just see this with people, with their role models, with their peers, because your environment dictates how you look, behave, act, etc. And part of that environment is with games, is with shows. It's a good medium, and you see that people can adopt certain traits and it sort of like incorporate it into themselves, because people aren't their own individual self. They are a culmination, a product of many different outside and inside influences. And it's kind of back to this whole debate of nature versus nurture. And the studies are suggesting that it's just equally cut down almost to the wire 50-50 when you look at studies involving twins, that typically it seems to be that nature is important, but so is nurture. For example, many serial killers, unfortunately, when they grow up in abusive households, that's just a prime recipe for creating a violent psychopath, for creating an individual who does not know how to socialize with the rest of the world, because he grew up in this environment in which this was how he learned that people was, got beat up, carries a lot of baggage, and then sort of takes out on other people. And of course, that's not good. That's not great at all. But just as that, if you have a really good environment, it can help. Now, to some extent, the argument back to the whole escapism can be true, in the sense of when you're having a stressful day, it helps. But there's also studies that show that typically the types of games we go to are going to be the type of player we are. Which is why you can see stuff like the big 5 personality traits are very good for looking at what type of games people are going to play. And so if you're wondering what the big 5 personality traits are, you can look at this acronym, and it's called OCEAN. And so the shit that is OCEAN is, it's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And we look at each of those, and that acts as our 5-factor model for OCEAN. So openness would be something like imagination, feelings, actions, ideas. Conscientiousness would be competence, self-discipline, thoughtfulness, goal-driven. Extroversion would be sociability, assertiveness, and emotional expression. Agreeableness would be cooperative, trustworthy, good-natured. And then neuroticism would be tendency towards unstable emotions. And so you are ranked on low score versus high score. And we typically see those who are very extroverted, that they'll tend to play games that are very social based. For example, you might have something like VR chat. So in fact, they engage in games that reflect their real world personality. There tends to be a direct correlation between those. Now, how definitive this is, we don't exactly know. As we're in the field of psychology, this isn't like many other fields where we exactly have definitive answers every single time. And even with the studies we have, we tend to see some overlapping situations with different studies and tests that can sometimes suggest 2 things at the same time. And while those aren't necessarily wrong, it can definitely create a little bit of confusion, because then we don't exactly know for sure. What we can say is usually, well, based on the research, to the best of our knowledge, this is what we believe to be the case. And of course, like anything, there's always going to be outliers. And so you have to keep that in mind. And then, of course, cooperation. It's back to, interacting with people, which is just co-op games in which people work together and problem solve. And video games can definitely be problematic, but there's also a lot of good things to do with video games, in the sense that it forces you to work as a team. Now, of course, if you've ever been in a legal lobby, you obviously know that not everybody is like that, for sure. Ever since I started playing ranked in League, I recognized that there was a lot of individuals who they would beg to differ through their actions, so that they are not looking to cooperate. But generally, for games like Diablo, the whole idea is that you have to cooperate and you pick teammates. And if you don't cooperate and you're playing together, it's going to be a whole lot more difficult. So for players, this can act as a way to have friends. Some of my best friends are online friends. I may not have ever seen them, but I talk to them on a regular basis. And it's a lot easier for me, especially if a busier life, in which I don't exactly want to go out and drive an hour to somebody's house or drive an hour back. So this acts as a good medium for, hey, I can just hop on the Discord call at any point in time and talk to them. And back to that, when you cooperate with people, it makes you a more agreeable person. With competitive games, if you're if you're somebody who's low in agreeableness and you're high in neuroticism and you're low in extroversion or conscientiousness or openness, if you're low in all those, you're likely not going to be good on cooperative games, especially the extroversion part. You're not going to be very able to make call-outs. It helps practice good social skills because you have to make the right call-outs to make the right plays. You have to know what the opponents are doing. You have to especially know what your teammates are doing because you're on a team and this is not just about you. So it makes you think in a lot less of a selfish way. So let me see. Did I cover everything else to this? I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I guess some of the other big reasons would be stuff like, imagination. And so when I say imagination, you can think of it in the sense of, well, fantasy and imagination kind of go together, right? I think I said that in the sense of, okay, if I paint a scenario for you, and I say something like, I went to grab pizza, and somebody threw a pizza at me. Your imagination is going to fill in all the details for you. You might think about, what did the person look like? What was the setting? What was said? What happened before and afterwards? Who all was around? Etc. You're going to tend to fill in the blanks with little to no information. Much as when you read a book, you tend to do this with the imagination of how the characters look and the setting and all of that, and the words that you're reading, and all you have is the words that you're reading, where your brain fills in all the rest of this. So with games, a good game, and for a lot of players, people are looking for games that have that. So Five Nights at Freddy's would be a good one. It's huge on the imagination aspect. It gives you just enough information and while maintaining this sense of mystery. And the big thing that drew players to it wasn't necessarily the gameplay, but it was that imagination part. It was that everybody was wondering and putting out all these theories of, oh my god, what about this, what about that, what about this, what about that, phone guy, who is William Afton, who is like the children in the animatronic suits, what about his son, what about the Bite of 87, was that the person from FNAF 4? And it created this real sense, and people came together to form all these theories as well, and it created a community where everybody, for the most part, got along, loved the games, and we all started talking, and we had to talk together to theorize, so it created a reason to socialize. So again, these articles are great, and I think they're super helpful, but the problem I see sometimes with articles is they kind of break down stuff into these super simplified formats and don't address all these key points. So if somebody comes across this and they just read this one article, of course, that's not the intention. I don't think that's what they're saying here either. But it's at least worth mentioning and passing the other side as well. So if you don't know, and doing more research before posting an article as far as making sure you have other factors on why people might game instead of just breaking it down into potentially detrimentally harmful simplistic formats. Because there's so many reasons. And these reasons aren't always bad. And in fact, some of the literature is conflicting, and I think it's important to keep that in mind and to note that, which they did excellently. Because it does come down, for as much as there's a general overlap, we also have to factor in why the individual does stuff. I mean, there's of course so much more, but I would be here all day long if I talked on this matter. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, and then if I have anything else to say, I'll sort of come back. But let's go on to the next one. Besides investigating the links between potentially problematic video game use and psychological functioning, as well as between reasons for playing video games and psychological functioning, it is relevant to also look at which game genres individuals prefer. Correlates of preferences for certain game genres are cognitive enhancement, but also the amount of time spent playing, and psychopathological symptoms. Males were shown to prefer action and strategy games, whereas females showed a preference for games of skill. Younger gamers seem to prefer action games, older players more so games of skill. However, it is not yet understood to what extent preferences for certain video game genres are differentially related to psychological functioning. Typically, research is focused merely on violent video games or one specific game within one specific game genre. Very good point. Thereby neglecting the variety of possible gaming habits across various game genres. In the present study, our objective was to examine the relation between video gaming and psychological functioning in a fine-grained manner. For this purpose, we examined psychological functioning by employing various variables such as psychological symptoms, coping strategies, and social support. Likewise, we assess video gaming in a similarly detailed way, ranging from A, problematic video game use, B, the reasons for playing, to C, the preferred game genres. This strategy prevented us from making potentially invalid generalizations about video gaming in general and allowed us to examine the spectrum of gaming habits and the respective relations between such habits in a diverse set of variables representing psychological functioning. Playing video games excessively should be appealing to individuals with poor psychological functioning because games allow people to avoid their everyday problems and instead immerse themselves in another environment. Moreover, video games offer people a chance to connect with other people socially despite any more or less evident psychological problems they may have. On the other hand, potentially problematic video game use may also lead to psychological problems because it reduces the amount of time and the number of opportunities gamers have to practice real-life behavior. Thus, we expected to find a negative correlation between problematic video gaming and variables representing psychological functioning, such that we expected more potentially problematic video game use to be related to dysfunctional coping strategies, negative affectivity, and poor school performance. Moreover, we expected to find differential correlates of people's reasons for playing video games and the psychological functioning. Playing for escape-oriented reasons, such as distraction, should go along with diverse indices of poor psychological functioning, whereas playing for gain-oriented reasons, such as the storyline or the social connections in the game, should be related to adequate psychological functioning. Also, we expected to find people's preferred game genres to be differentially related to their psychological functioning. Finally, we aim to shed light on the unique contribution of each measure of psychological functioning to the prediction of problematic video game use. A pretty good article. Nothing feels as good as winning, except maybe just barely losing, with fanfare. In his 2017 book, Irresistible, The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked, author Adam Alter describes a tactic that gambling machine manufacturers have used to make people feel like they've won something, even when they have netted a loss. Imagine the playing field in a slot machine. In the classic version of the game, you can see 3 rows of 3 columns of symbols, but the center row is the only one that matters. If you wager $1 for a spin and get 3 matching symbols in that row, you win. Otherwise, you lose, even if there are 3 jackpot icons in the top or bottom row. Now imagine a machine that lets you double your wager to $2, so that pays out if you get a winning combination, either the top row or the middle row. Or say the machine lets you bet $3, so that you win if any of the 3 rows is a winner. Some machines take this idea even further, letting you build winning combinations out of any contiguous line of symbols. For example, the cherry in the top row first column, the wild card in the middle row middle column, and the cherry in the bottom row third column. But the catch is you have to pay for every line you want to play. And that cost of making all these bets on all those rows can add up to the point where it washes away any single win. Sometimes you'll get 3 cherries in a row, and that will pay out $2 with a big fanfare. But if you spent $3 and win that $2, you still netted a loss of $1. But it can still feel a lot like a big win, where you get more out of than you put in, even though it's not. I think this also happens with story dice that some gaming systems like the Star Wars RPG use. Psychologist Mike Dixon and his colleagues call this a loss disguised as a win, and they did a little experiment to show how it can be equally exciting. They hooked test subjects up to machines to monitor their heart rates and skin conductivity, both measures of how excited someone is. They then had subjects perform the various envious tasks of playing Lucky Larry's Lobster Mania, a virtual slot machine game where players can bet on multiple lines of play, much like what I just described. Also, just like I described, it was frequently the case that betting on many lines in one spin might result in a small win, but the math was such that it netted a loss. A loss disguised as a win, given that the game would still celebrate the matchup of 3 clams or starfish on a play line. For extra incentive, the experimenters told the subjects they would get real money payouts if they got lucky enough with their virtual gambling. Of course, they found the subjects got excited when they had a loss disguised as a win. Not as much as when they got a win big enough to net them a real gain after the cost of the wager, but consistently more than other losses. As I said, I can see this effect possibly showing up in tabletop role-playing games as well. One of the things that I love about the Star Wars role-playing game is its dice system. It's a system that lets the dice focus on storytelling instead of simple binary success/fail outcomes for an attempted task. Using this system, players roll up to 6 types of dice when they want to do something like pilot an X-Wing through a debris field or blast a stormtrooper. 3 of the dice are positive and relate to how good the character is at the attempted task and how advantageous circumstances are for them. The other dice are negative and relate to how difficult the task is in that situation and what forces are working against the character. Some results from the positive dice can be cancelled out by the negative dice and vice versa. Below is a short tutorial of the system if you want to understand it completely. But the idea is that in addition to you unambiguously succeeding or failing in an action, players can succeed with threats or fail with advantages. So, like the gamblers, they can have losses disguised as win.
Hey guys.
I'm going to go ahead and check this out. Let's see what this is all about.
This is David Crennan. I'm the DM with Never Tell Me the Odds. And here's a little tutorial about how the dice system works in the Star Wars RPG by Fantasy Flight Games. These dice are considered storytelling dice because their mechanic takes the story further than the usual pass-fail die roll of games like D&D. We have ability dice, proficiency dice, and boost dice, commonly referred to as the green, yellow, and blue dice. On the other hand, we have the difficulty die, challenge dice, and setback die, also referred to as the purple, red, and black dice. The 3 skill dice all determine how good a character's ability is to do something. The difficulty and setback dice all determine how hard it is to accomplish what you want to do. Ability and proficiency dice, that's these guys here, those are included on your character sheet. They're how good you are at doing something. Difficulty and challenge dice, these 2, set the difficulty of a particular situation or how hard it is to beat an NPC at doing something. Finally, we have the boost and setback die. These guys here, they just help or hinder rolls depending on environmental conditions or situational modifiers. There are 3 positive dice symbols and 3 negative dice symbols. The positive symbols each correspond to only 1 negative symbol. Success corresponds only with failure. Advantage corresponds only with threat. Finally, we have triumph and despair. So these 2 have their own unique effect, and we're going to talk about that in 1 second. When a player is ready to make a skill check, they'll look at their character sheet and see how many green and yellow skill dice they get to roll. The number and type of negative dice, the purple and red ones, are determined by the GM. Every roll includes both positive and negative dice. Each success is canceled by a failure, and vice versa. The same thing happens with advantage and threat. Threat and advantage cancel each other out. If no successes are left, the roll is considered a failure. If there's advantage left on the roll, we let the player determine what happens. If there's threat, the GM gets to determine what that is. If no advantage or threat are left, it simply means there's no advantage or threat on that roll. It doesn't affect the success or failure. They simply provide a narrative element to tell you if you're left in a better position or a worse position than when you started. Okay, so here's an example. Stormtroopers come around the corner, you take out your blaster and fire. Roll your attack roll. Your successes and failures cancel out and you're left with a success. It's a hit. Good job. However, there's some threat on the roll. So the DM gets to decide that the Stormtrooper falls backwards and triggers an alarm panel on the wall. Uh-oh. Finally, the triumph and despair symbols. These are the most awesome part of the game, because if a triumph comes up, something really super awesome and amazing happens in the game. Like maybe some Ewoks decide that your protocol droid is a god. And if a despair comes up, something really terrible and awful happens, like maybe you lose your hand in a lightsaber fight. Just like advantage and threat, we let the players determine the positive symbol, in this case, triumph, but the negative symbol, despair, is decided by the DM. This is where it gets crazy, because a triumph and a despair do not negate each other. They don't cancel each other out, which means you could potentially have both of them on the same roll. Now, a triumph does count as an additional success, and a despair does count as an additional failure. And while those successes and failures can be canceled out, the amazing or terrible thing never goes away. So you could roll both of them, have them both apply on the same roll. It could even be a failure, but you could still have a triumph. It could be a failure and some threat, and you get a triumph. It could be a failure and a threat, and you get some triumph, and you also get a despair, and that would all be in play on the same roll, which is why this game is so great. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. That's the tutorial. And if you want to see this in action, we actually play it every other Friday on the Saving Throw Show channel. It's Never Tell Me the Odds. Find the link below. 7:30 p.m. to 11 Pacific time. You can also join in the chat and actually influence the outcome of the game, just like these dice. So jump in the chat, say hi to us, and watch us every other Friday. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.
You know, it's always interesting to me to see all the cool ways that people make games hyper palatable and keep people coming back, because there's all these different solutions to different problems, right? And what I mean is that with games like this, there's not just one way to play it, and not even just one way to interpret how the game is played. Even with that being said, you get an option to be very creative with these types of games, and so you're not just limited to, okay, this is what I must do, or this is how it must be. And I really like that about these types of games in particular, because it's important that we're able to adjust our expectations and be able to have some flexibility. You want a good loop. You want a good loop on any game, and you want something that keeps you coming back for more over and over. And so if you're experiencing, so for example, let's say you have food. So if you eat something over and over again, the same food over and over again, you're going to find very quickly that that food gets pretty tiring, gets pretty boring. Yeah, if you've ever worked, for example, let's say you work at Pizza Hut, and you have cheesy bread every single day. Well, the cheesy bread was great at first because it was an occasional thing, but now that you've had cheesy bread every fucking day, nothing's really changed about it. It's just you've done the same thing in the same way over and over again, that you're just not getting the same amount of opioids that you used to get flowing in through your brain. I think it's opioids, right? I think that, no, I can't, I wish I remembered, but I just know, I don't remember exactly the chemical. I apologize for my ignorance here, but I do know for a fact that if you do the same shit over and over again, and nothing changes about it, it can get pretty boring, which is like, for example, why when I work out, sometimes I'll change it up as far as like duration or intensity, or the songs I'm listening to, or the way I'm running, or the type of run I'm doing, whether it's slow or fast, or have people run with me, or maybe like again, like I'll play a different song or a different podcast, because even little basic things that you can change up in a game allows it to feel fresh and new and not feel like that same cheesy bread that you had for the 50th time in a row. I really like the system too. It's very unique. And that's the other thing, you want to be able to stick out. It's okay to be inspired by stuff, but when you look at games like Nickelodeon All-Star Brawls, for example, I don't know, how many viewers on Twitch do they have right now? Let's see. Should we go over here? Nick All-Star Brawl. I imagine probably nothing. Like literally probably a dead game right now. Maybe one viewer if that, but I doubt it. It's probably dead right now. Literally, it's so heartbreaking. This was supposed to be the Smash Killer, right? But the reason games like this do not work out is because they're built on the very premise of insincere copycatting, and just it's like a clinky version of Melee. You need to have something that differentiates yourself. There's no reason why I would buy a shitty or inferior product. There wasn't even voice lines when this game first came out. And as well as trying to compete with a gaming franchise that's been around for like literally years, how are you going to do that? You released with a lot less features for a premium game price. This game, when it released, if it was like $5, you could have argued that because it was for an indie team, right? And so, I don't know. This is unfortunate that it hasn't even been that long. It hasn't even been a year since this game came out, and it's like a dead game. It's been a dead game for a while now. Versus, like, let's look at, I don't know, Multiverses, right? Multiverses. Well, this still has 6.7k viewers. Even this late at night, it's like 12:44 while I'm at. And this still has almost 7,000 viewers. And there's a few reasons. Well, of course, Warner Brothers, right? Everybody knows Warner Brothers. Everybody knows the DC characters. Everybody knows Scooby-Doo. Everybody knows Adventure Time. Everybody fucking knows Rick and Morty. These are all huge franchises. When you think of Nickelodeon, the first thought that comes to mind usually is SpongeBob. I'm sure there's other things, but they don't tend to have the same level of worldwide recognition as SpongeBob does. And of course, this game separates itself in the sense of how it's played. So Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was very bare bones. It was like a shitty copy of Melee. This game, although it shares some stuff, the biggest differences, for example, is there's no block button, so you have to get good at dodging. The movement speed is different. The way you move around and attack is different. It's hugely based on team-based fighting, whereas Smash Ultimate, even though it has a team-based mode, it's more focused right now currently on one-on-ones. This game has, it's still in like beta access. That's the other thing. It's free. This game is free. You can play this game for free. Yes, you can put in money, and I will admit some of the skins and shit and the characters are pretty fucking expensive. But you don't have to do that. You can just grind away if you want to. You at least have access to some characters starting off. This game is free, so people can actually try it. They can actually see if they like it for themselves. It's hard to convince somebody to put in $40 to a game that they don't even know if they're going to like. As well as when All-Star Brawl came out, they had all these Smash players that they were paying to rate their game and shit and say, this is the next Smash killer. And of course the problem with that is those are Smash streamers. Smash is their main game. Smash is their main source of income. Of course they're going to go back to Smash because that's how they make money. That's what the people want to see. That's just what the people want to see. It's just, there's nothing that separated it. There was so few stages, and for a premium game price, it's like, how am I going to fully commit on that? Why am I going to spend that? And then of course, I don't think there was any cross-platforms. That was a problem too. So when you have a smaller player base, it's especially hard to keep the game alive if you don't have any cross-platform. And there's already mods for this game right here in Multiverses. I don't know if there's mods for All-Star Brawl, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't when it first came out. And that can be a pretty damn big problem. This game has cross-platform. And like I said, Warner Brothers has access to a lot of different characters. Like they're probably gonna bring in Rick and Morty. And that's going to be pretty fucking incredible. As well as the company that's working on this is a bigger company than that indie team that was working on All-Star Brawl. So it's kind of just a culmination of issues. But just, again, trying to compete, you need to be your own thing. You can take inspiration, but you need to be your own thing, because trying to take over and compete against something that's already established, you're going to find it's particularly difficult. Because how are you going to convince a player that's put hours into something and be a direct competitor? It's like opening up a mom and pop store, little pizza parlor, and trying to compete against like fucking, I don't know, not Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut's kind of declined, but I don't know, fucking, what's the big one? What's the big pizza place? Let me look it up real quick. It's the #1 pizza place right now. Pretty sure it's Little Caesars, right? Yeah, okay, so it's like trying to compete against Domino's or Pizza Hut or Papa John's or Little Caesars. Those are the big four right now. So that would make no fucking sense to me. You'd have to be like out of your mind to try to do that. It can happen, but it's not likely. So it's why you need to, convince people of why you're different in a lot of ways, and not just try to be a copy. So, going back to that, let's see. Sorry about that little rant. So, a quick example. Say that a player shoots at a group of stormtroopers wrestling through a blast door. The story dice turns up no successes. The shot goes wide, but they do net an advantage results. The missed shot hits the blast door controls, causing them to close halfway and inconvenience the last few stormtroopers, still beyond the doorway. Not as big a win as eliminating an enemy, but still a bit satisfying and exciting on balance. The system has disguised a loss as a win, and the same principles as with the gambler come into play. Going away doesn't cost anyone anything. Maybe that's why it's so much more fun than rolling a 20-sided die and reading the simple pass-us-fail result. Well, there's some truth to this, right? It's about the journey and not the destination for a lot of games, and as well about the whole disguising loss as a win. It's how you interpret a lot of things. So if you manage your expectations, you'll never be disappointed. Part of what makes a game so good is if you learn to think of things in smaller steps. So for me, instead of having to win, like when I got to Elite Smash on Smash Ultimate, I started feeling like a little bit sweaty in that regards as far as like how I played. And I started thinking like, oh my gosh, like I need to really compete, and I have to win. And even when I won, I didn't like coming close or having what I considered a lucky win, where they'd SD or I'd hit them with a move that I wasn't sure was the safest option or optimized. I just kind of threw it out and it worked for me. And then I just started thinking, okay, well, I win because I'm just playing the game, because I'm having fun. If I even hit them once, I'm winning. If you just look at it in the right regards, right? So even if you like lose in the traditional sense, like they lost more money than they actually netted, it's the small little wins that make it worth it, and it's the experience that can be just as enjoyable too. And I think that's important when you're having fun and playing games, is that you manage your expectations. If you expect nothing, you'll never be disappointed. And it's about competing with yourself. So, sorry, hold on. So, what I was saying is, competing with other people, the problem with that is that now you're holding yourself up to this expectation, when really you're not them. So a better, healthier way, of course, is to compete with yourself. Because the problem of competing with other people is that for you to win, they have to lose. And it goes the same way around for them. And that just means that both parties can't come out enjoying it. That somebody's going to come out salty or bitter. But if you're competing just against yourself, who you were yesterday, even if it's just on a mental set, right, then it can be a lot more enjoyable. And also just recognizing that progress is not linear. So some days you might have setbacks, some days you might even go on a loss streak. And that's perfectly okay. At the end of the day, you're playing a game to have fun. Of course, competition is enjoyable, competition is fun. But we want consistent enjoyment. And it's going to be particularly hard to get consistent enjoyment if we're going about it in these manners that are quite frankly inconsistent, especially at the higher level. You're not going to be able to go like that. I mean, even just having over a 50% win rate in games like League is considered pretty good, especially at the settings of like when you start getting shit like Diamond or above. Diamond is where people start getting truly sweaty, and it's right there around the corner of where you're starting to enter into some pretty good territory. Of course, you still see Diamond players make some questionable plays, but that's okay. You just you're having fun. Like you're trying to have fun. I'm a low-level League player. Like I'm just Bronze 1 right now. I just started playing the game, and I play Yumi, which players will say a lot about that. But I don't care about all that. I'm not competing against the players. Like yes, I'm trying to win, but I'm trying to win against myself. And part of that, is in the results of how do I do better plays? How do I focus on myself? How do I improve myself? How do I counter what they're doing? And playing to enjoy the experience. And that's at the end of the goal. When you're not having fun, you need to set it down. Otherwise, you start developing this addictive obsession of I just gotta get one more win, I gotta get one more win, I gotta get one more win, and then before you know it, you've wasted hours just hard tilting over a fucking video game. And you don't even know why you even played it. Well, this website is pretty damn good.
Mary redeemed a 50,000.
Oh my god.
$1 cash prize playing Chumba Casino online.
I was only playing for fun, so...
Now, isn't that weird? Isn't that weird how we just learned about gambling addiction? And then we get an ad for that? Like, what the fuck? Am I living in some sort of bizarre world? I just really want to know. Because I don't understand. I hate that people promote this type of shit. Obviously, I'm not saying these people are like chose this ad in specific, but I just think gambling is such a shitty thing. And people always like to argue, well, just gamble responsibly. Bro, I wish it was that simple. I've seen people ruin their lives over gambling. Come on now, bro. We all know, even if we ourselves haven't done it, we've all heard of somebody who's ruined their life over fucking gambling. We've seen the ads and everything where people bet it all and then they go broke and they lose their wife and kids because they can't afford to pay for anything, and they spend like money just trying to win it big, win it big, win it big, and they're chasing the dragon because one time that they did good around some buddies, and now they think, oh my god, I gotta get that feeling again, and I can't just walk away now. What if I can get even more money? Gambling is such an immoral thing. Like the way it's designed and everything to make you feel, and they always share these stories on these fucking ads of oh, I won big, but then they don't take the time to mention like how unlikely that is, and how players will literally deal out cards in ways to guarantee that you get a shitty hand, and all the other little tricks. And even if you think you're good, if you end up at a table with people who are really good at it and have been doing it for years, unless you literally like grew up young and you dedicate your whole life to it, and even then, you still might not be able to outsmart the professionals. It's like you're probably not going to win. The whole system is designed to profit, because if they didn't profit, they'd have to close their fucking doors, because then they couldn't pay the employees. And if they couldn't pay the employees, then there's nobody out there to deal your cards. So of course, if it was truly worth it, then the system, they wouldn't be raking in so fucking much money. I'm actually curious. Let me look up how much money do they fucking profit every year. So, okay. The gross gaming revenues of casinos in the United States was highest in Nevada, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey in 2021. Nevada reported a gross gaming revenue of $13.43 billion US dollars in 2021. In the same year, the total gross gaming revenue of U.S. casinos amounted to approximately $53.03 billion US dollars. Let's look at the chances of winning the lottery. Okay, it's about a 1 in 303 million chance, according to Mega Millions. So, yeah, why the fuck would you ever? You think you're going to be that one person, they train you, like, you know, they try to convince you that if you do this skill or that skill. But then it's like, you know, the professionals have already seen that shit. You think they don't know about that, bro? It's like they try to convince you that, oh my god, they've never seen this before. And it's like, it's their job to know how to fucking scam you. It's their job to work one over on you. And then they learn a lot of psychology to try to convince you to stay. And that, oh, you know, this time, or what I've seen some of these scumbags do is they'll offer you insincere advice that, you know, if you bet this or if you hold your cards here, you know, it increases your chances. And it's like, no, they don't. Why would they tell you that? They're not your friend. Don't you understand that? They're not your buddy. They're not your pal. You're not about to go grab drinks with them. They're not even somebody you know. Their job is to make money. And if they did that for people over and over again and it was truly good advice, then they wouldn't be good at their job and they likely wouldn't be employed. So, unless they're just a really nice person, likely they're just trying to talk you into staying. Like how car dealers or salesmen or phones. Like I worked for T-Mobile for a while, and the big thing for T-Mobile was we want to try to talk somebody into a phone and convince them that they need this. You know, this product, they need it. And it's just like, come on, man. You always try. You know, the whole idea is you're trying to talk to people and tell them why this is an advantage for them or how this benefits them and all this type of shit. And it's like, no, it benefits the company. But if we can somehow convince you that it benefits you, then you won't feel so pressured. You'll feel like you're making the choice. Like this is your freedom. This is what you want to do. So you're like, whoa, 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 and your monkey brain goes off because all these flashing colors go on, and you're like, yeah, I won! Oh my god! And that makes for a lot more memorable moment. And they design it that way so you will remember it. And then next time you go in, despite the fact that you lost about 20, 30 times in a row and you just lost 10 grand, you won 500, and that 500, they made sure to bring your attention especially close to that. And with the losses, they just try to make the losses as quiet as possible, as bland as possible, so you'll forget about them. They don't have any of the flashing colors or anything like that. And even with the losses, some of them will tell you, ooh, well, you know, you did great. Or they'll tell you, your chances are increasing. Well, you mean my chances are increasing? If it's 1 in 303 million, it probably didn't increase that much. If I shoot for it again, it probably, well, now you're telling me I reduced it by a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction? Shut the fuck up, bro. Okay, we're on toxic behavior. Hey, this reminds me of my former associate, Caleb. Super toxic. This is kidaz.net. What is a toxic gamer? There are many types of gamers. Most players sign on to a game and are looking to have a good time. They're interested in doing something that they enjoy, chatting with their friends, and being the next level of the game, or the game. Most players are gaming for fun, but not all players. So, what is a toxic gamer? What is a toxic gamer? A toxic gamer is a player who has a bad attitude in an online gaming context. These players are players who are constantly complaining, swearing, being rude, acting out towards other players, there's a typo right there, and bringing other players down. These players are considered toxic players. Toxic players don't reserve the toxicity for players they don't know. They are typically verbally aggressive with their teammates as well. They talk down to the people on their teams the same way they would talk down to players they don't know. Unfortunately, a huge number of multiplayer games experience toxicity in one way or another. Who is a toxic gamer? Toxic gamers tend to be younger, male players who are highly emotionally reactive and impulsive. They are filled by the anonymity of the gaming space. They rationalize that toxic behavior is part of gaming. Effects of toxicity. There are many effects of toxicity, and none of them are good. Many players report feeling depressed or even suicidal. Many studies have also reported that toxic behavior caused around 20% of players to quit gaming altogether. Unfortunately, it has also been reported that women are more likely to experience toxicity in gaming, and this leaves them feeling discouraged and stops them from gaming or pursuing careers in technology later in life. What to do if your child comes in contact with a toxic gamer? Number 1. Report the player. All games and platforms have a process for reporting toxic players. It is essential that you report the player in order to get them to stop. 2. Call the toxic player out for being toxic. It's okay to say to a player, stop being toxic. 3. Don't engage with the toxicity. The more they get a reaction from you, the more they get out of being toxic. The goal is to ruin your experience, so don't let them. 4. Anti-toxicity initiatives have been started by gaming companies to stop toxic behavior. Educate yourself on what toxicity in gaming looks like, and make sure to stand up to it. It is not just part of the game. It has no place in gaming. So yeah, the problem with being toxic, especially to friends, is you have to think about your long-term relationship with the person. How is this going to interact with you in the future? So whenever I'm feeling particularly heated, what I like to do is I like to take a moment and step back, and there's a few different things. First of all, I like to say, notice that I'm having the feeling that I am upset. And this allows me to create some distance and sort of assess the emotion better so I can properly deal with it in not such a heated state. Of course, the next thing being is that I take a moment from something whenever I'm feeling particularly tilted. Because I recognize that people don't just forget the things you say and do, and these can have long-lasting impacts for years to come. It's why many children, when they grow up, and even if their parents have atoned for their sins and they're no longer abusive, the kids still haven't got over it, and they carry that throughout the rest of their life in some cases, and that's really unfortunate. So when you're playing games, you need to keep in mind that the goal is to work together. The goal is to have fun. And you also just need to ask yourself, am I the type of person I would get along with? So something I find that's particularly helpful, for example, and the main reason, for example, like with my former associate Caleb, I started recording our conversations and I started playing them back to myself and listening to them. And I respectfully wanted to play them to him, but of course I didn't go this route, and I should have. I really should have. I wish I would have, but I instead just blocked him. But what I should have done is I should have played those back for him and showed him the way he sounds. Because sometimes it's hard to defend yourself when you get a chance, especially if like somebody calms down and then you play it back and you say, hey, look, I'm not trying to call you out, I'm not trying to be rude at you. And this particularly, this isn't always going to work, but if somebody truly loves and cares about you, then hopefully with all the good intentions, and if they really care about you, they will actually listen to what you have to say and then cooperate. So recording that back and playing it back for them allows them, when they're calmer and when they're more relaxed, to sort of hear what they're saying, because sometimes you're not even thinking when you're in the heat of the moment, and then you go, ooh, man, that was pretty bad. You can even do this for yourself. If you find that you have a tendency to get toxic in games, just record your gameplay and then watch it back through. And also just the whole idea of being toxic, well, you're spending that time raging when you should be focused on how to do better in the game. And when you're always blaming other people, then it makes you plateau, and then you end up being hard stuck, for example, in like Iron or something on League, because you are part of the problem as well. It takes two to tango. If you walk away from a situation, then there is no problem. I've always said this before. If somebody has a problem with me, they don't really have a problem with me, because I ain't even involved in it. I don't mess with that shit. I don't get involved in that shit. I ain't down for that shit. I'm an adult, I'm not 26. I just turned 26 recently. Happy birthday to me. And I've spent most of my life dealing with toxic people, and I don't want to anymore. It was part of the reason that I didn't want to pursue a career in psychology. It was because I noticed that there was a lot of toxic individuals and a lot of people who go to therapy. The goal is, of course, you get to see people who do good, and there are people who genuinely wanted to get help. But then you have individuals who come in and they don't see themselves as the problem. They bring in, like, the worst one, the wildest shit is when parents bring in their fucking child to get therapy, and you see how the child is acting out, but then you realize, oh my fucking god, it's the parents. Because you realize that the parents live in a filthy environment. The parents are constantly telling the child what a piece of shit they are. The parents are constantly arguing with each other. The parents are constantly grounding the child, not letting the child have a social life, and it's like, what the fuck? But, what do you say? And so you try to bring them in and say, well, actually, I think you're the problem, and this is why your child is acting out. And, it's a delicate subject. How do you even approach that? It takes some time and a lot of planning. And even if you do it, it's like some of the parents, what they do is they start getting defensive, like, I'll just go somewhere else. And it's a defense mechanism, and then you think, what a fucking piece of shit that guy was. And then, but the worst part is you think, God, that poor fucking child. And so you do end up with these situations where individuals are just, they're on a downward path and there's nothing you can do to save them. It's kind of like the lifeguard example I provide. So if you train to be a lifeguard, part of that training requires you to, when you're trying to save somebody and they're kicking and screaming, you got to tell them to calm down. If they don't, you push them away. And you might particularly think, well, that's kind of cruel. Well, the alternative is that you try to save them, you try to be a hero, and they're kicking and screaming, and then they're pulling you down along with them, and now you're both drowned. That's like, okay, well, epic fail. You're both fucking dead now. So some people are just on a downward path, and you have to let them go because they're not getting better. They're not changing anything about themselves. And the biggest thing is that they might not even want to. I see this a lot with people who go into rehab. I've seen some people go into rehab, and I've been very happy for them. And they followed the treatment plan, and they did everything they needed to do. And then when they got out, 3 weeks later, they overdosed and they're dead. And a big reason is because they go back to the same environment, around the same people. It then triggers them to want to use again, and they look at all these memories and they start thinking about the drug again, and they start craving it. So sometimes the best way to handle shit, if you're finding that you're the particularly toxic one, is maybe just don't play the fucking game. If it's going to be an addiction, if it's going to be a problem. Some things in life are just not good for you. Anything has the potential for addiction. And if it's ruining your life, then you need to step away, at least temporarily. Because you might be rationalizing yourself that I'll just, in this case, I'll just have one drink. I'll just play one game. Not such a big deal. I'll just play one game. Nothing's changed. You haven't done the work that will, what's changed. Unless you can articulate to me what's changed, then how do you feel confident? You can't even convince me. You can't even begin to at least try to convince me of that. So how are you going to say that, you're going to change something? If you run into a brick wall over and over again, at some point it's your fucking fault, bro. Like, it just bewilders me how people do shit and then they keep going back to it. Like, what? And I understand it's not as simple as just stopping. It's not. But for your own sake, if nothing else, if you want to have long-term relationships and you want to actually have fun, you need to think about that. I mean, how many potential friendships have you ruined online? Like, how many potential friendships could you have had if you just were a nice player? And, maybe that person was actually better than you, objectively speaking. That's the other thing, is you tend to delude yourself into this false reality where you're not looking at the kills and the deaths and the assists, and you're not looking at what rank they are, and you're not looking at how you're doing, objectively speaking. So when you're holding people to these standards, you're acting this way, then be prepared to fall on that. Because that double-edged blade, be prepared to fall on the other side of the shit that you're casting out. And I find that people don't want to be treated that way. It's weird, right? Because the way you're acting, it's not like you want to be treated that way. And that's the thing. Treat others the way you want to be treated. You do not want to sit there and talk. We've all had people sitting there. And even if you're making a good point, nobody's going to listen to you. They're going to tell you to shut the fuck up, bro. Because if you're being super toxic, they don't give a fuck. They're not going to. They're going to be more focused on the fact that this guy's a douchebag. So even if you are spitting facts and you're dishing out common W's, you're actually just a fat walking fucking L, loser, degenerate, who nobody gives a fuck about and can't wait for you to shut up so they can get back to trying to have fun, which the whole point of the game is. Alright, so this is another article by frontierzen.org. This is Dark Participation in Games. Ugh. Fat loogies all fucking night long. This is a pain in the ass. With the advent of digital games came the advent of gamer cultures and identities. A gamer became a new social first for the group of individuals who played video games, primarily in arcades, in the late 1970s. Over time, however, gamer cultures have grown into what is largely discussed as toxic cultures, and come to become more associated with exclusion than inclusion if you don't fit a certain mold. Despite its prevalence, deviant behaviors in games as a subject of academic study is a confusing space, with different researchers using different criteria to describe the same things. This article provides the first comprehensive cataloging and overview of dark participation in games. This includes defining these behaviors, cataloging these variants, and discussing their social and psychological impact and the potential underpinnings. It is critical to establish a shared language about what these behaviors are in order to effectively understand and combat them. No, that's absolutely true. That is a huge issue with games today, is that they are extremely divisive, where players are constantly at each other's throats. A good example, again, to Smash is you can't play a certain type of way. Like, we're supposed to all be coming together for a common goal of playing the game. But then we notice that if we break it down, there's like, what is a true Smash player, right? So somebody who tries, to win is a sweaty tryhard. Somebody who just plays the game to have fun is a filthy casual. Somebody who just wants to play the game and use a few moves is a spammer. Somebody who uses different combos is a button masher, or is throwing shit out. And then it's like over and over again where you see people are just constantly finding ways to shit on each other. If you play Sonic, that's an automatic assumption about you as a person and your skill level in the game. You're kind of shit on by default before the match even begins. You automatically, there's all these assumptions about you're going to run away, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Or if you play a top tier character, it's like, oh, well, they're carrying you in the game and you have no real skill. So it's like you can't fucking win with some of these cocksuckers, dude. It's just like they just want to sit there and they want to go, oh my god, what the fuck, bro? Like, this is not fair. I don't know what to do. And it's like, shut the fuck up, bro. How are you gonna say that? I mean, seriously. Players just, we're supposed to unite together, and even then it's like with toxic gaming culture, with teabagging, taunting, saying, oh, I didn't pick my main or whatever else. It's like, you're always going to be lonely if you live that type of lifestyle. You're just not going to have any meaningful connections online. At least you're not going to be able to form new ones approaching it like that. And the people that you do end up surrounding yourself with are going to be other toxic individuals that are just as unlikable. And that's just, then you're going to create this echo chamber, this little bubble of all these people who jerk each other off and tell each other, yeah, you did great, bro, yeah. That's the problem. You end up deluding yourself, and then you live in this bubble where you just hear the same information. You never learn anything because you never hear the differing opinion. You have all these yes men who confirm that, in fact, you're not the problem, and so you become deluded, and you start living this fantasy world of yours that just isn't the reality, and then people make YouTube videos about you because you end up being a clown. Samurai 9 is a good example. People started putting YouTube videos up about him recently, because he's just completely delusional. And you always hear the same stuff from him. And that's the other problem, is you always hear him say the same things, so you can see that as a person, he just has not grown. And because he hasn't grown, people are getting tired of the same stick over and over again. People are starting to catch wise to it. And it gets boring, right? Just to see the same shit over and over and nothing else changes. You know what to expect. It's predictable. So, because it's predictable, it gets highly boring. You just know that when you go on one of his streams, he's going to be super salty. When he's super salty, he's going to bitch and whine. And so it's like, why do I want to sit there and do that? That's very draining. The whole point of games, one of the biggest reasons is escapism, right? Or just shut off your brain for a little bit and have some relaxation. Even if you're trying, there's like a certain threshold, right, to where you have relaxation and a level of challenge. And that level of challenge, it has to be done in a carefully selected way, right? So if it's a mechanically challenging game, then you typically don't want it to be mentally taxing as well, because then that creates too much challenge for the potential reward, the feedback loop of success. So, it's particularly challenging to deal with somebody who's constantly toxic, and that's what you see in these communities, where it's like you can't just go in and talk to streamers. Like I don't even join other streamers chats. I was in this one dude's chat recently. He said I was playing like a kid because I was whooping his ass as Bowser and I was just using up B. And by that same argument, it's all perspective, right? So from my perspective, it was, I'm just playing a game, you're getting salty over a game. And, okay, so what you're saying doesn't make sense to me, because if you've seen the same move being used like 5 times in a row, then you would think that you would counter it and not approach me in the same way 5 times in a row, so I can't punish you the exact same way because you haven't learned to adapt. But it's funny how everybody has their own perspective on what is right and wrong in a game. And we're always going to disagree, at least at some level. So if we can't come to at least an agreement on that, then the best thing we can do is just try to have fun and get along. If not for the other player, for ourselves. Because that can get really stressful. If you are tilted for several hours, like straight, that's just not just mentally bad, but physically bad, because then you're releasing a flood of stress chemicals such as cortisol, which raises your blood pressure and heart rate, causes your breathing to increase, and just is overall not good for your well-being. It was Dr. Smokey's. Yeah, it was Dr. Smokey's, and it was in Eaton, Ohio. My grandma used to take me there all the time, and I really, really enjoyed it. And again, like I said, even though I don't smoke anymore, I really had fun going there because I got to try out all these cool vape juices, and they had all these things to choose from. And the ladies, they were always really nice, and I used to purchase from them all the time, and it was just really cool. I mean, listen, I'll be honest, I miss my grandma a lot, I miss her a lot. She was a really cool woman, and it's like, it sucks that she had to go and pass away while I was still so young. It's really hard to deal with that, because it's like, I wish I would have had more time with her, because I have all these good memories of her. And if I would have known, that's always the thing, right? If. We can spend all day doing this, but it would have been nice to know that things were going to happen that way, because at least that way I might have been more enjoyable, which is why I say to you, if you have loved ones in your life and if you really care about them, try to enjoy the time with them now while you can. Versus just waiting, because you just don't know. You're not guaranteed a long life. You're not guaranteed a healthy life. Every day is a blessing. You just don't know. So try to work with them as much as you can. Try to show. It doesn't have to be these grandiose things. It can be like the tiniest small things. You can just show your love and appreciation in tiny ways, just by saying, hey, I was thinking about you, or whatever. And you figure you only see them a couple times a year. That's not much throughout your lifetime. And that's assuming, right, that they live for a long time and that you do too. Alright, let's go ahead and move on. I was just reminiscing on my grandma. I miss her a lot. I mean, I miss my grandfather too, don't get it wrong, but my grandmother was a lot more active in my childhood development than my grandfather was. My grandfather wasn't the best person, and some of my family members haven't come to terms with that, unfortunately, that he wasn't exactly the kindest person, and he was kind of a a bad guy, objectively speaking, like, got fired from his job because he got caught drunk doing pills, driving, and then pissed on himself, and then bragged about it like it was a good thing, or pushed our grandmother down in front of us. Or I remember a time when, you know, when I first got piercings, that he tried to grab it, and he was a bona fide pussy. I whooped his ass real bad because he grabbed my lip and pulled really hard on the piercing and started hitting me. I think I was like 13 at the time, and I whooped his ass for it. He was just a real, you know, it's always the guys who act like that, right, who are the biggest pussies. Because, you know, anybody who's actually ever been in a fight knows that you don't want to just try to pick fights because you never know what the other man is capable of. And the best way of, you know, handling a fight is just not having a fight in the first place. It's de-escalation. Because you don't know, that man might have a knife or a gun or whatever, and so you don't want to escalate shit. And also, it's just like, he was supposed to be, you know, my caretaker, but he never really cared about us like that. I mean, he cared as much as a drunkard could, but I believe in some manners he might be burning in hell. I know that's hard to say, that's like maybe not fair to say, that might even be cruel or disrespectful to say to some people, but he was never there, he never repented as far as I could see. He did a lot of things that just wasn't right, and I remember he tried to convince me like that being gay was a sin, and you know, I can't do the nail polish or anything, or the piercings or long hair, and always made a big deal about it, and always was ripping people off when he sold them weed or stuff. I remember how I used to buy weed. God, I was such an idiot kid, but I'd buy like an eighth from him for $50, and even then he would try to short me, or he'd sell me a gram for like $20 a gram, which was that's just highway robbery. But you know, I was a kid at the time, I didn't know any better, and it was just like, I remember he shorted me one time like half a gram, and I said something about it, and he like made a big deal about giving me back like $10, and you know, like started complaining. It's just stuff like that, and just the friends he surrounded himself with. He didn't really have any friends anymore, which was kind of a sad thing. But I got to see why, because the good people in his life has left because good people want to be around other good people. They don't want to be around somebody who's just, you know, sitting there. He kind of just rotted away watching westerns. I tried to be close to him, but there was just nothing to do. That we just didn't have anything in common. I mean, I don't know if he was my actual grandfather or not. I can't remember, but I don't think we were related by blood. So it was just like, man, like, I didn't know how, you know, what I was supposed to say or do. He was just some guy in my life. But I have good memories of him, but the bad memories are, you know, they're overwhelmingly way more bad memories than good memories, and that's just not good. That's just not good for a kid to be surrounded by somebody like that. And I would have liked a normal childhood life, but I just didn't get that with him. And my grandmother had her issues too, but she was actually loving and kind and caring and like proactively involved in my life. My grandfather never called me to check on me. My grandfather never cared to ask how I was doing. My grandfather never tried to make time for me. None of that. And I ended up in foster care because of my grandfather. I mean, we ended up in foster care more than once, unfortunately. There's a lot of baggage there. You know, I still miss him. I still love him. But I can't tell you. You know, I don't want to lie. Like, people feel like bad and they feel almost gross. And so they don't want to speak the truth, especially about the dead. They don't want to speak the truth. But the thing is that you're damning the victims of the dead then. You know, that you're damning the victims and you're silencing them by not speaking the truth. You need to speak the truth. This truth is the right thing to do. You owe it to yourself as well, so you don't start living this fake world. You want to separate that. You want not, like, I know this is an extreme example, but you want to do it with people like Stalin or Mussolini or Hitler, but because they're family or somebody that you knew, it's like, oh, you feel guilty. Why do you feel the need to lie? I mean, don't you think lying is a bad thing? So why the fuck are you doing it? Just be honest with yourself and say what it is. If they want a good person, they want a good person. The whole idea of respect is that you earn it. I don't want to say something if I don't truly believe in my heart of hearts. If I don't believe you're a good person, I don't want to say you're a good person. I just don't want to. With the advent of digital games came the advent of gamer cultures and identities. Oh wait, we already read that part, didn't we? Silly me. Today, gamer is part of everyday jargon and widely integrated into personal, social, and cultural identities. We express our gamerness with our choice of clothing, the references we make, and how we view ourselves, others, and our place in the world. Over time, however, gamer cultures have grown into what is largely discussed as toxic cultures, and come to become more associated with exclusion and inclusion if you don't fit a certain mold. Oh, we already read that, didn't we? Wait, well, I'll just read it again, fuck it. This shift was noted by Golding in 2014 with his op-ed, The End of Gamers. In it, he discussed the shifts in video game cultures away from inclusivity and toward combativeness. 4 years later, these same sentiments were discussed by Condis, New York Times op-ed. As events like the 2014 harassment campaign #Gamergate amply demonstrated, to some members of the gaming community, the increased visibility of people of color, women, and LGBTQ people in gaming circles is seen less as an expansion and more as hostile takeover. Similarly, in a Woo 2019 article, Brianna Wu states, though the gaming world is huge and diverse and full of smart and wonderful players, it is also thronged by misogynists and racists who feel free to advocate harm against anyone who's not like them. These communities of exclusion and hostility have come to be housed under the umbrella of toxic gamer cultures, a phenomenon that is quite well known in gaming communities. At its root, the idea of toxic gamer cultures refers to prevalence of deviant behaviors within games, but also readily dismissing one's responsibility for them under the shared idea that is just part of the anonymous and toxic gamer collective identity. Some researchers have gone so far as to predict that the normalization of these behaviors within gamer culture could eventually shift and or sustain cultural norms toward eventually seeing harassment in games as harmless and acceptable. Underpinnings of toxic gamer cultures. Why toxic gamer cultures have developed is a question many scholars have attempted to answer. Researchers pointed to several environmental, community, demographic, and gameplay factors that contribute to the creation and sustainment of toxicity in games and gamer cultures. These are discussed in more detail below. Environmental and community factors. There are several environmental and community factors to consider when discussing toxic behavior in online spaces, and specifically within online games. Cordica and colleagues discuss three of these: social cognitive theory, theory of planned behavior, and the online disinhibition effect. In the 2019 article entitled Toward a Unified Theory of Toxic Behavior in Games, put briefly, social cognitive theory argues that individuals learn toxic behaviors in games through social learning. That is, any pre-existing toxic gamer cultures within games would perpetuate toxicity. Theory of planned behavior argues that an individual's intentions to engage in toxic behavior is based on the specific context of the situation. That is, people may behave negatively towards others if it is accepted as a group norm, i.e. in toxic gamer cultures, and if those who perpetuate toxic behavior do not experience consequences for their actions. Lastly, the authors discuss the online disinhibition effect, which is the idea that while you are interacting on the internet, others cannot see you, you are invisible, and that they don't know you, you are anonymous. This anonymity and invisibility are generally thought of as being among the primary driving forces of toxic behavior, because they create an ideal space for people to push social boundaries with a sense of few repercussions. For example, research has found that when anonymity was removed from social media sites, it reduced the amount of trolling behavior. Cordica and colleagues concluded that the most meaningful predictor of toxic behavior was the online disinhibition effect. However, social learning theory and the theory of planned behavior could play a role in sustaining toxic cultures once they have been established. An additional factor to consider is the social identity model of de-individualization effects model. which suggests that de-individuation or depersonalization of group members can emphasize the presumed similarities of members within a group and encourage behavior consistent within the group norms. That is, the more anonymous a person is, the more de-individuated they are, i.e. the online disinhibition effect, the more likely they are to adhere to group norms. Research has found support for these ideas, specifically in the realm of toxic behaviors. A study by Amiot and colleagues found that in-group norms that favor derogatory behaviors toward an outgroup can predict the likelihood of a member of that group exhibiting those behaviors. That is, if you consider yourself part of the in-group and engage with someone whom you consider part of the out-group, and the in-group norm is toxic behavior toward the out-group, you are more likely to engage in that type of behavior. Research from Helvert, Bruce, and Neal, 2020, further support this idea, as they found that normative beliefs about cyber aggression among gamers significantly predicted cyber aggression toward other players. This kind of accordance with group norms has also been found in other kinds of online spaces. For example, Zhao et al. Found Facebook users tend to stress their group over personal identity when discussing the ways that they behave online. Taken together, it seems that the effects of the online disinhibition effect make gaming spaces more open for toxic behavior to happen, with the side effects of the social environments potentially fulfilling a perpetuating cycle. It's starting to melt my brain here, and I'm starting to get a headache, so I might call it a wrap here. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit more, and then we'll go ahead and end it. But this has been very productive. Thank you guys for joining in here. I'm going to keep going for a little bit longer, so just bear with me, and then once I leave, yeah. Personality, gender, socialization, and age. There are also a range of personality and social factors that have been found to have significant relationships with toxic behavior among online game players. Hong and Ching found that social extroversion, a sense of inferiority to others, and depression positively predicted online trolling behavior. But toxic behavior has also been positively correlated with sadism, the tendency to derive pleasure from inflicting suffering, psychopathy, a personality disorder characterized by persistent antisocial behavior and impaired empathy, and Machiavellianism, a personality trait which sees a person so focused on their own interests and goals they would manipulate, deceive, and exploit others to achieve their goals. Of these, the researchers found sadism to have the strongest correlation with toxic behavior, and concluded that online trolling seems to be an internet manifestation of everyday sadism. Also found that people who harass others people score high on measures of Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and gamer identification measures. The relationship with gamer identification would give credence to the suggestions of the side model in gaming spaces. There's also the idea that games are a boy's toy, and the toxicity stems from the idea that games are being infiltrated by anyone who does not fit this mold. This can create heightened tension and lead to the harassment of others as a way to make them leave their space, so to say. Research has also found that age is inversely related to toxicity, with younger players perceiving many forms of dark participation, such as flaming, as less serious or even normal. The individual motivations of the perpetrators of these kinds of behaviors also need to be considered. Cook et al. Interviewed perpetrators of toxic behaviors, also called internet trolls, to uncover the antecedents for their actions in games specifically. They found that the motivation for these behaviors spanned three broad categories: attack, sensation-seeking, and interaction-seeking. Even so, the researchers note that these elements are not mutually exclusive. Attack-focused behaviors are defined as a direct attack on other players' enjoyment of the game or gameplay. This was the most commonly reported motivation. Sensation-seeking focus refers to behaviors that lead to enjoyable consequences for the troll, but are not inherently good or bad for other players, e.g. spamming. Interaction-seeking focus emphasizes trolling as an unorthodox method of communication that the trolls enlist to make players get involved in the conversation and the game. Interaction seeking plays on the idea that no attention is bad attention. The researchers also found that the primary trigger for becoming a perpetrator of toxic behavior was social, i.e., if they were trolled themselves. Other triggers included internal, personal enjoyment, and circumstantial. Gameplay factors. Well, actually, we'll go ahead and end it here, but we'll talk a little bit. So, you do see that to a lot of extent that this has become normalized. And this article is very right. If you go on YouTube right now at any point in time, you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of trolling videos, and of those millions of comments that all sort of indicate the same thing. I think for me, the biggest thing that I find with trolling, especially now, is it's really heinous in the sense that somebody could be minding their own business and you can fuck with them and piss them off. And if you did that in real life, you'd be considered an asshole or a bully. But online, it's like the moral implications are completely different. It's switched. It's almost acceptable in a way, and even encouraged to some extent. Because, like they said, of the anonymity. This article is spot on in that point. People tend to be douchebags online, and a large part of it is to fuck with people, and oftentimes they were fucked with themselves. These are usually individuals who do not interact good with society, who were bullied, who were picked on themselves, who are showing psychopathic behaviors, who show sadistic behaviors, who are pretty antisocial and are kind of losers. And unfortunately, these people tend to get away with it. And when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people sort of indicating, hey, keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, you get that positive feedback loop that says, yep, this is the right thing to do, or yep, this is the attention I want. Like, another big factor is attention, right? No attention is bad attention. So when you're getting tens of thousands of views on these trolling videos, it's like, well, hey, right there, that's a big sign to go ahead and keep recording that, keep recording these gameplays, you know? And it's just bad to me because, especially if an individual is innocent and you end up making them cry or stressing them out, you don't know what that person's going through. They could have already been having a really fucking bad day. And, you know, it's slim, but it's never none as far as, like, does somebody end up killing themselves because you pushed them too far, because you fucked with them and, you know, they were already, you know, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I try to keep that in mind. And not just that, but, you know, I don't want them taking that aggression on other people or in their own life. I don't want, you know, to interact with somebody, ruin their fucking day, piss them off, and then later on, you know, they go and yell at their wife or somebody because they're pissed off and they're just doing shitty and they don't know how to express that, and now their partner has to deal with that, and it creates this ripple effect. I don't want them to take that, you know, take that with them into their personal life. So I don't troll people like I used to anymore. If I'm going to troll somebody, the best way I can describe it is I need to have an extreme limit, and I also think they need to deserve it. But then even when you say deserve it, what does that mean? Because that's different for everybody. And we can sit here and argue, and that's a topic for another day. But does two wrong? But one question I'd like to ask is, does two wrongs really make a right? I mean, if you can justify that behavior, then who's to say they can't justify theirs? And because they have their own set of rules or whatever. At the end of the day, you should treat others how you want to be treated, and you should keep in mind this is another human being, right? That's something that's hard to keep in mind when you're online, but that's another human being on the other side of that screen. That's just trying to have fun. Unfortunately, your idea of having fun is fucking with people and being a dick. You're a bully. You are being a bully. You are literally being a bully by trolling people. Like, you are being a bully. You can argue it however you want. You're being a fucking dick. And if that's your way of having fun, maybe you shouldn't be playing games. If you really feel the need, go online and just search up, like, harmless trolling videos where people kind of make pranks. You know, you can find pranks where sometimes, you know, you get somebody good. Hell, I watch trolling videos that are funny as fuck, but, like, how far is far enough, bro? Don't add to it. There's already videos online. If you have to really get that itch, then just watch a video that's already created. Do not add to the problem. Just add a video that's old, right? That's like a couple years old. Go and watch that video instead of watching a new one. That will increase, you know, that will sort of increase the behavior and tell people to keep pumping out that content. Just watch something old. Watch an old trolling video that's been out for a couple of years if you really have to. Ideally, you just don't do it at all, but even I admit I'm a pretty sadistic individual myself, and I recognize this. I used to troll heavily, and so now it's like I still want that craving, and I recognize that I'm always going to want that craving, so I just watch videos instead and let that be like a better, healthier way to do it instead of going out of my own way to be a dick to somebody, and that fulfills the need for it. So yeah, just treat people with respect. Keep in mind that's another person, and how you affect them, they might carry that out on other people in their life, and this might create a chain reaction. And just also the fact that that could be a potential friendship that you're ruining. You just don't know, and you won't know ever because you're being a fucking dick. So, hope you guys enjoyed. I'm tired as fuck. I really need to go to bed.